His hair was the same,
that
but he
black
just
seems
drew
to
a
be
black,
all
like
over.
black makeup on his beard to make his beard come out more. It was ridiculous. Like
Hilarious.
like back then, you were just like, I hate Hulk Hogan. Now you look at it, you just laugh your ass off. It's like, who took a magic marker and painted it that beard?
Wow. I thought his hair was, I mean, because that's how loud it was.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah,
loud it was. It
yeah.
whew.
So like they took their money and gone. So it was mainly the two big ones was Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, along with
Okay.
the Undertaker was still being big, but he was more like used as a gimmick. At the time when the Montreal Screwdriver was coming on, the ascension, like you were watching kind of the ascension of Stone Cold Steve Austin, but he wasn't
Okay.
where he would be at later in the next year. A guy named, it was also Survivor Series 97, was the debut of a certain person named Rocky Maivia. That was his debut pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
Rocky Maivia became The Rock.
The Rock. Maivia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he started off as Rocky Maivia, and then they shortened it to The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are the two biggest. But Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart were the two biggest superstars for the WWE had at that time, and they couldn't stand each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everyone in the world who was backstage at the time and knew both of the guys would tell you Bret was a constant professional and Shawn Michaels was a fucking drug infused prick.
Yikes. You sounded like you were in on that
I mean, you could
on
kind
that
of
battle.
tell with him. Like there would be certain things he did, like he would be like he was. There was one time that he supposedly got jumped by a bunch of guys at a bar
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't like him strutting around and wrestling. And he said, like, because he literally got his ass whooped at a bar, but it wasn't by a bunch of people. He lied. It was by one Marine, and because Shawn
Yikes.
Michaels was drunkenly fucking hanging around his goddamn girlfriend. And this Marine punched him in the fucking face.
Yikes.
He would get out of matches and shit where he was WWE champion, supposed to lose it. He would get out of matches and shit like that. It was during their Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Their even though they wrestled previously many times, what their biggest encounter before the Montreal Screwjob was WrestleMania. Was it 12 or 11? 12. Their Iron Man match is probably what some would say one of the greatest WrestleMania main events of all time. The Iron Man match, and it went over 60 minutes, and Shawn Michaels won and was a prick to Bret after the fact. And what Vince had planned on was for WrestleMania 13 to be a rematch of that Iron Man match, and Bret would have win, and Shawn faked the injury because he didn't want to lose to Bret. So it going back and forth and stuff, and Bret tried to be professional about it, and try to like let bygones be bygones, and tell Shawn it was like, look, like I know we had our problems in the past, but I'm willing to work with you and drop the title to you. And Shawn was like, well, I'm glad you said that because I wouldn't do the same for you. And they ended up getting into a fight, and Bret's a little an actual fighter, from what people had said, and Shawn can't, what some people would say, couldn't fucking hit a fly if it was stapled to a forehead. And he ripped out a cloak of his hair. So these two guys can't fucking stand each other. And also at the same time this is going on is Bret Hart's contract is about to expire, and Vince had wanted to keep Bret because WCW and their not their owner, the guy, the lead production WCW, Eric Bischoff, who's their vice president of programming, really wanted Bret Hart. And he was offering Brett a lot of money to jump ship. And
Mm.
Brett didn't want to leave because his loyalty was to the WWE. He's got a place that made him a star, a place to keep his family employed. Like, he didn't want to leave. And Vince McMahon is screaming, "Oh, I don't have enough money to keep you around." But finally, Vince offered Brett a 20-year deal worth $1 million.
20 years.
20-year deal worth $1 million a year, which is significant because it keeps Brett around for $1 million a year. Plus, he gets his merchandising rights, but it also keeps him.
This is some 90s era type stuff.
But at the same time, it keeps him a job. It gives him a job security for the next 20 years because he knows he's not going to keep wrestling. So let's say he wrestles 5 more years and decides he wants to retire. He still has a job as a backstage agent or trainer of wrestlers or executive. He's got himself a job, and he's got himself $1 million a year.
Or even still a character in some type of way.
Yeah, a character or some type of way, or a screen character, or both. He could be an on-screen character, like an authority figure or something like that, or a manager. And also, he's a producer backstage.
Right.
And he's getting paid $1 million a year. So Brett agrees, and then a couple of months later, Vince comes back up to him and say, "I can't afford this.
Yikes.
I have to break this contract. I can't afford it." And Brett is pissed. So Vince tells Brett, call Eric Bischoff and see if you can get that deal. And Brett is kind of like, well, now it's going to be, they're going to offer me even less money, especially they heard this. So supposedly Brett calls back Eric Bischoff and they offer Bret Hart a 3-year deal worth $3 million a year plus merchandise.
Okay.
Merchandising, part of merchandising sales. So Brett agrees to it and he takes the deal. But here's a problem. Brett is supposed to leave after Survivor Series and he's the WWF champion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling it from Vince and people who worked there at the time, there was a fear that Eric Bischoff, if Bret Hart's still the champion after Survivor Series, is that he's going to take the belt over to WCW and they're going to do something derogatory with it. And they have that because of what a wrestler a couple of years before it did, named Medusa, back in the WWE. She was named Alundra Blaze, and she was the women's champion. And for some reason, well, budget cuts from WWE's point of view, they had cut all the women that were wrestling for them. So there was a period of time where women were not wrestling for that company. So they cut all the women wrestlers, and most of the women that they had gotten to come wrestle, because they signed Medusa and changed her name to Alundra Blaze, and she came from WCW originally, the NWA, and they signed her to come there. And most of the wrestlers they got to wrestle her were from Japan. So once they cut all the wrestlers they got from Japan just went back to Japan.
Right.
So it left for Medusa. So Eric Bischoff finds out about it, who's again the vice president of programming or vice president. I forget his old title, but he's running WCW. Finds out that Medusa has been released and signs her promptly, saying that WCW is going to build their own women's division.
Okay.
And at the time, Alundra Blaze was with WWE Women's Champion. And she had asked about the belt. No one called her about the belt. So she tells Eric Bischoff, well, I still have this belt. He was like, well, just come on Nitro. And he comes and tells her, and she comes on Nitro, and it's a shock debut because no one knows about, unless you're privy to the dirt sheets. And this is the time before really the internet. Everyone had the internet, so no one had dirt sheets or behind the scenes thing other than like wrestling professionals or people who hang out backstage or know somebody knows that she's been cut from WWF. So she takes the belt, the WWF Women's Championship, places it over a garbage pail and drops it in.
Oh my.
And goes, fuck that place.
Oh my.
So the WWE is like, what? The WWF, excuse me, is like, what the hell? Because they see this on
Yeah,
national television live.
that's a
And they're
lot.
afraid Brett is going to do something like that.
Oh
But he
my.
couldn't do anything like that because immediately after that, the WWF sued WCW and they had to come to a settlement.
Oh
And
boy.
the WCW promised never to do that again. And also, they got WCW got WWF to never do something like that if something like that happens to them. Because also a little Leslie forgot about issue was WWF did something like that before to WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1991, WCW's world champion was a guy, well, you know him, and I know him, and wrestling fans know him, known as Ric Flair.
Rick the frickin' Flair.
Yeah, and this is like during the time where um, Ted Turner had bought out Jim Crockett Promotions, um, because Jim Crockett Promotions were and like Southern Wrestling before Georgia Championship Wrestling, that was
Mm.
Ted Turner TBS's number one show on the weekends. And Ted Turner loved wrestling. And so he's able to get into the wrestling business. He ends up buying out Jim Crockett Promotions. And he lets like other people run it. He's not particularly running himself because he has a media empire at the time. And
Right.
during the time, the head of then WCW was a guy named Jim Herd, and Jim Herd
Mm-hmm.
thought that Ric Flair was past his prime. I mean, Ric Flair was in his mid to late 30s, still not past his prime, but he wanted to like get newer guys in there and less emphasis on Flair. So he wanted Flair to cut his hair, become a whole new character, the Spartacus character, supposedly.
Right.
And Flair wasn't too keen on that because one, Flair was the head booker, well, matchmaker, um, at various times during that at various times, even before Jim Herd came in, and he
Mm.
was like, I'm not doing that. So Jim Herd just fires Ric Flair, and Ric Flair is still, well, at that time, the NWA WCW champion because WCW is still affiliated with the NWA at that time.
Mm.
So Ric Flair is out of job and he's still NWA champion. And he goes to like, hey, I need my, because during that time when you're NWA champion, you have to pay a $25,000 deposit
Mm.
to keep the belt because it
Oh
guarantees you're not going
wow.
to lose the belt. So if you lose the belt, you lose a $25,000 deposit. And not only that,
Right.
as long as you're champion, that $25,000 deposit is also building interest. So when you lose the title, you get your $25,000 back plus interest.
Mm.
So it just guarantees that you don't lose a damn title or don't take the title
Right.
with you. You happen to get fired. But
Right.
he inquired about his $25,000 deposit plus interest and he refused to pay him. So he's like, well, the belt's my physical property. And guess who comes calling? Vince McMahon. And guess what shows up on WWE television? WCW NWA's big gold belt. You've seen the big gold belt.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You've seen
Yeah.
the big gold belt. And NWA WCW is like, what the hell is he doing? So they proceed to sue WWF. So it's like this big thing. So, but go back to the original story. Is Brett wouldn't do that. First of all, you can't do that because like WWF will sue them into oblivion. Eric Bischoff
Mm.
doesn't want that. He's like, no, don't bring the title with him. And Brett would never do that because he's a constant professional. But Vince fears that he is going to do that. So,
Okay.
and not only that, the main point is Brett refuses to lose to Shawn Michaels in Montreal. He's a Canadian hero, which he still is today. He was
Yeah.
one of the 100 they did a few years ago, the 100 greatest Canadians in history, and Bret Hart's on that list.
100 greatest Canadians in
Canadians in
history.
history, and Bret Hart
And
is
one of
on the
them is a fictional wrestler.
Well, he's a real person.
Maybe not
He just
fiction. Yeah, he's a real person. Yeah, plays a
I
character.
mean, he's revered in Canada, and he doesn't want to lose
Okay.
in Montreal, his home country, to a
Gotcha.
guy who's a prick. He's like, I'll drop it before, I'll drop it after, but I'm not dropping the belt to him. Forget it, because Shawn Michaels